Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this live stream brought to you by Christian Concern and the Christian Legal Centre. My name is Rob Smith. I'm one of the lawyers with the Christian Legal Centre, and I'm going to be joined today by my colleague Navaid Syed, who also works for the Legal Centre, and the Reverend Matt Timms and his wife Sally, who are the leaders of the Wave House Church down in Cornwall. Now, the purpose of today is to talk about how to organise a COVID-compliant drive-in church service. Now, that's something none of us ever thought we would be talking about just 6 months ago, but we are where we are, and the landscape is changing all of the time. So we're here to try and help you and to encourage you to get your church out there and to find new and innovative and interesting ways of getting the message out to your congregations if you possibly can. So we're going to be inviting questions throughout. If you can put your questions in the comments, we'll deal with as many of those as we possibly can, and we'll get through those as they arise, if we're able to and the time permits. So if I can introduce you now to my colleagues, Navaid Syed.
Hello.
Good morning, Navaid. And
good morning,
Matt and Sally.
Hey.
Hi, morning.
It's great to be with you today.
And thanks very much for joining us, all of you. So we're going to start just by showing a little video of what Matt and Sally have been up to in the past few weeks, a little report from Sky News. And so we're just going to play that to you now, just to set a little bit of a backdrop as to what we're going to be talking about today. So if we can just play that, that would be really helpful.
Churches have been empty across the country after they were forced to close during the coronavirus pandemic. But one pastor in Cornwall has found a creative way to get his congregation back together by hosting a drive-in service. Sky's Fraser Maud reports.
The government may have categorised churches as non-essential, but dozens of worshippers in Cornwall would disagree. These are parishioners from 3 churches in Newquay, attending England's first drive-in service.
It's fantastic to see a full car park.
It's the brainchild of vicar and keen surfer Matt Timms, who saw it as a way of safely bringing his flock together despite the lockdown restrictions.
Just to have the opportunity to be able to gather again after months of not being able to see people. So we just had people connecting via their cars and, waving at each other. It was honestly meant the world to a whole bunch of them. And the feedback that I'm getting so far from some people is that they just absolutely loved it.
For those who couldn't make it, the service was streamed live on the internet.
And if he's got one that's missing, he's going to go searching for it. And that's exactly what Jesus said.
For those who could, it was an event to celebrate and remember.
It's been so great to see all these people turn out, and in a safe way. There were flags up, music rolling, and it was just beautiful.
For us, drive-in church has been really exciting. It's been so much fun to come here.
Reverend Timms says drive-in services like this, which have been operating in Northern Ireland since last month, provide mental health benefits as well as a spiritual boost.
To bring people together, to be able to worship together is so important. In fact, I'm going to be encouraging all of our congregation just to, write to our MPs, write to government and say, look, we've got to see churches being able to worship together in some way. I know, obviously, we're not looking to break all the social distancing rules.
Newquay's surfing vicar hopes this will be a catalyst for other congregations to find creative ways of worshipping together, and is looking forward to celebrating today's success by catching some waves.
Bye-bye.
Fraser Maud, Sky News.
So, Matt and Sally, congratulations for getting your first drive-in service under your belts.
Yeah, well, glory to God, mate. It was he literally made it all happen. It was a miracle, actually. Hopefully we'll unpack a little bit of that, but yeah, great stuff.
And the feedback that we were getting there and the report from the people who attended all seemed to be very positive.
Very positive. Yeah, just happy smiley faces, and just that sense of being together again as a family, just to worship and exalt Jesus, was just amazing.
So, Matt, And Sally, could you just tell us a little bit about your church, the kind of people that go to it, a little bit about the demographic and the area that you serve?
Yeah, Newquay is it's predominantly a surfing community built around tourism. So in our church congregation, there will be all sorts of ages, right from 0 all the way through to we've got someone who's 91 years old. So yeah, a big mix of people. We're a family on mission is what we like to call ourselves.
So I'm guessing, being in Newquay, a surfing town and a town that relies on tourism, the COVID situation has probably hit you pretty hard.
Yeah, there was an article last week in the BBC that they published that Newquay was the most hard hit community in all of the UK. So yeah, it's been hit very hard. And as a local church, obviously, we've been looking to respond to that by doing community kitchens and feeding people and housing stuff. So we've been sort of seeing how we can respond to the needs that are growing.
Fantastic. So how long have you been at the church? When did you join?
Well, our story in the church, we began our story in ages ago. 2000, we first walked into the church as a long-haired surfer looking for somewhere to get married. 9 years later, became the assistant pastor, went and planted a church in Perranporth, and then came back to the church actually as the senior leaders then in 2018, September 2018. So yeah, we're thrilled to be back in Newquay.
So you've been billed in some quarters as the surfing vicar. Is there any truth in that?
I love surfing. Surfing for me helps me connect with God, and yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus first and foremost. I'm a surfer next.
Okay, so you've now got the distinction, it would appear, of being the organisers of the first drive-in church service in England. We understand they've been doing it in Northern Ireland a little bit longer, but presumably organising this event was just a walk in the park, was it? You came up with an idea on the back of a fag packet, and the next thing it was a reality.
I wish that was the case, but it's not. No. I just want to say that this journey, this moment actually came on the back of a 40-day journey of praying for our community. We'd come across this resource here, Keep Blessing Your Community, a 40-day guide to changing the spiritual atmosphere of your town, of your village and your city. And we, as a local church, as soon as we went into lockdown, really felt we need to call the church to a moment of prayer, because prayer is going to be what changes things. And so we called the church to pray just after, in fact, it was just after Easter, a 40-day prayer journey that actually finished on Pentecost Sunday. And then in addition to that, there was another prayer thing that the Lord was calling us to, which was to pray for 10 days between Ascension and Shavuot, between the Jewish calendar, and we really felt that those 10 days, which is when actually the early church in Acts 2 would have been waiting in the upper room. They would have been praying for 10 days, and so on the back of a very intensive season of praying, fasting, and intercession, the Lord clearly spoke to Sally, both Sally and I, and he said, take my church outside. And that's when we thought, well, how do we do that? What does that look like? And then we saw drive-in services were being run throughout America. Some guys were doing this thing in Northern Ireland. So we weren't reinventing the wheel here. But we just thought, well, let's see if we can do one of these things here in Cornwall, in Newquay. So we approached our parish council, and we got referred to the Cornwall Council, and then began this journey then of exploring, could we do this?
So was this an idea? Obviously, this is an idea which you considered very prayerfully for some while. It was laid on your hearts. So did you just keep it to yourselves and say, right, okay, this is for our church, we're going to do this? Or what was your attitude towards the whole thing?
I think for us, when we planted a faith community in Perranporth, we very much looked at the fact that we were church without walls, because we didn't have a building at that time. So we were always saying church without walls. We've done church in a marquee, we've done church on the beach. And so for us, unity with the other churches, whatever denomination that might be, has been really key. And so we had been meeting with the other churches, and when we came back here in the September 2018, and we'd had just a couple of prayer breakfasts around our table, getting to know the ministers that are here in Newquay at this time. And so after putting it to our leadership team, we then said, actually, are there any other churches that would be keen to journey this out with us? And there were a couple of churches that said, yeah, let's have a go at this.
Yeah.
Was it universally accepted?
Yeah. Well, I'm not too sure about the other churches, but I think one of the key principles here, in one of the things that really made this event work really well, was the fact that it wasn't just about our church. This was about God's kingdom. That's what we were contending for here. And the unity thing was really important. This wasn't about Wave House or any of those other churches, but it was about the body of Christ coming together at a very difficult time in our nation, when worship and, public preaching, it was almost like it's been marginalized and we're not allowed to do this, we're not allowed to do this. But actually, when the church comes together, I think it was really key, actually, that there was three ministers from three different churches all sharing a platform, all preaching the gospel. And I think there was great, with Psalm 133, we know it well, where there is unity, the Lord commands a blessing. And it's a principle there when we're not looking to build our own kingdoms, but we're looking to build the kingdom together with others. Wow, I think God can do just amazing things for that.
Yeah.
So the idea is there, you've got buy-in from the other churches, you realise that there's going to be a bit of work to do. So what sort of things did you have to do to get this event on the road? What was necessary to take it from a concept to a reality?
Yeah, so we spoke to, first and foremost, one of the councillors in the local council. He was really receptive of the idea. He was like, Matt, that's a great idea. So I need you to go and speak to the chief police, go and run it past him. He was really supportive of some of the work that we've been doing in the community during the lockdown. He was quite new in post as well. We ran the idea through him. He was really supportive of it. Great, no problems. And then that request got put through to the Health and Safety Department in the council and in Cornwall Council, who, quite understandably looked at this request through more meticulous goggles, and requested that we would then submit our health and safety documents, public liability insurance, and all risk assessments and all that sort of stuff. So we had to make sure that we had all of those things in place, which we did. We submitted them to the council, and then they came back to us and they said, "I'm really sorry, but you're not able to do this." And we were like, "Oh, okay, well, why is that?" And this is the bit that I really hope people just capture this moment, because this is really key. The council said to me that your event is not within the permitted guidelines for events in the UK. I was like, well, why is that? Boris Johnson's just announced that we can do drive-in cinemas. Why can't we do drive-in church? And the response I got back was this: worship is not within the permitted regulations at this precise moment in time. And as soon as she said worship is not permitted, it was like God just really spoke to me and said, Matt, this is the ground of contention. This is the battleground. Am I going to be worshipped? Am I allowed to be worshipped in this nation at the time? And we know that the Bible says our battle is not against flesh and blood. So we don't want to. The battle is not against the council. In fact, the people of God, we need to be working with our councils and with our councillors and being a blessing to them and praying for them and uplifting them. So the battle is not against the flesh and blood; it's in the spirit realm. And so we knew then that the battle was for worship. And we know that the Bible says that, If Jesus will not be worshipped, the very stones of this earth will cry out in praise and worship. So we knew that we had to press in. And 3 times we heard the words no, that you can't run this event. Once from the council, then the local police had a bit of a change of mind. They were like, no, I'm really sorry, because the council said no. We're now saying no. And then the council and the police together then said, no, you can't run it. But I knew that God had told us to take the church. Jesus said, take my church outside. And so when Jesus tells you to do something, you've just got to press on, and you've got to do it, and you've got to make it happen.
Matt had also just brought a message to the church on our live stream with regards to from Acts 2, whereby it talks about, you know, that we will worship in the homes, but also out. And so literally those weeks leading up, we'd been, you know, obviously doing, as every church leader has been doing, you know, doing the live, you know, Zooms and the prayer meetings. And so we just knew that we were at that stage. The body was ready to take the gospel out to the streets.
So how long did all this correspondence take, toing and froing with the council? How long did it take to overcome some of the objections which are being raised?
Oh, literally the whole thing went from Jesus giving us the word to within 2 weeks we were out and we were doing it. And let me tell you, we had a 48-hour period for us where there was so much contention. I mean, we engaged lots of intercession and prayer from various people right across the nation, and they were all praying. Yeah. And it was a is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Do you know what I mean? We were having conversations with you guys at Christian Concern. Incidentally, you guys, I just want to personally thank you guys, because you have been amazing. And just to know that we had, as church leaders on the ground, that we're trying to break through into new ground and push forward into new territory, to know that we had you guys in the background was just phenomenal. Your team have been amazing. So yeah, we bless you and we thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. So just once again, from the practical points of view, you've overcome the objections. Was there any document in particular which really caught the council's attention? Was there anything where you just had to go that extra little mile just to get a document which showed that you were doing this properly?
Well, we obviously had to submit, like I say, all the health and safety risk assessments. We had to ensure that within those risk assessments that we were demonstrating that we were completely going to be COVID compliant. We then got those risk assessments sent out to an independent assessor, so somebody who works and submits health and safety documents to councils all the time. They then looked at it and said, yeah, you need to tweak that, but you know, great job, sort of thing. So so that was really quite key. Then to make sure that obviously that we had public liability in place to cover the event, and I think those sort of things, the sort of practical things. You know, there's a lot of toing and froing with emails to the council, to their risk assessment department, and they were, you know, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? You know, because this, I think, doing it on private land would have been one thing, but we were looking to do this very public event on council land, smack bang in the middle of Newquay. I mean, it was no wonder that they wanted to scrupulize everything and look into all the fine detail of it all. But, you know, to have you guys in the background as well, like I say, was just great.
But by the time you got your offering to them in its final format, I'm presuming that it would have been, or you made it as difficult as possible for them to refuse it on reasonable grounds.
Yeah. So we and Steve Double actually and Anne Double MPs, they were really good, like really working behind the scenes, saying, you know, guys, what are you doing? So they were lobbying the council behind that to say, you know, this really should go ahead. And I think really what we're hoping is that this kind of has opened the door now to other forms of public worship and preaching across the nation.
Yeah. It was from the Monday right through to the Thursday that we were sat waiting. And when we were talking earlier, for me personally, it was almost like, if I'm speaking to any women out there that have carried a child, it was like you don't know the day and the hour when a child is going to be born. And there was just that sense that something was being birthed. And I really felt that in the spirit. And so we was pacing up and down as women do before that day of arrival comes. And so we heard at 6:05 on the Thursday evening before we went live on the Sunday. So the 48 hours from the Thursday to the Sunday were pretty busy, getting all the practical stuff together then.
Yeah, and we had to prepare for an event that we didn't have permission for.
Beforehand.
So we had to put everything in place, like your staging, your sound, the stage and the screen and the worship team, and all of that stuff had to be in place. And we didn't actually even know that we were going to be able to run the event.
I think that's called faith.
That's called faith. That graphic designer put the graphics together, and we were viewing them at 10:30 on the Saturday previous to that, so that we could go live. So yeah, there is a bit of work to be done.
So, question everyone's desperate to hear: how many cars rocked up?
Well, I was there with my 2 children and some great volunteers, stewards from all walks of life that were welcoming people onto the car park. And we think we had typical church question, isn't it? How many people did you have on a Sunday? Well, obviously we know that it was heard right across Newquay, but we probably had around about 130 cars, and then we had the stewards and an overflow car park for the worship band, so there was probably another 20 or 25 cars. So even if you average 3 people, some there were 5 in the vans, you do your maths, 130 cars, we were saying about maybe 400 people.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Did you do anything specifically for the kids just to keep them extra entertained?
Yeah, well, it's always great when you bring families together, isn't it? Because
we know what it's like, are we nearly there yet, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Sat in the car, think they're all going on their holidays. We had a great team that run the Sunday Club programs in both churches. Actually came together, and they put a little gift bag together with some colouring, some treasure hunt stuff, because it was Father's Day, just visually, some healthy snacks and a drink and some stickers with Jesus Loves Them on. And then as people exited, they left the fathers, we gave them all a Yorkie. So they all had a chocolate Yorkie bar as the men left.
Now, this was a drive-in service, so it must be safe to assume that everybody turned up in their car.
We tried to promote that. We did, and we were very strict on any of the communication. They all had a handout as well as they entered in with the requirements of of what needed to happen in case of emergencies and all of that. But yes, there were some people that rocked up on motorbikes. We didn't anticipate them and the motorbikes coming in. We hadn't actually got a waiting area for them, but that was great. And then some people, so we had Piran's Angels, who are like street pastors that go out. They actually manned that area that we allocated specifically for anybody passing by and wanting, with the 2 meter ruling and signs up. And yeah, there was probably 30 people in that area.
Okay. Any pedestrians?
Yeah. So we were already getting stories through of like this local surf guy was walking through his car park as he normally does to go and check the surf, and just wanders through this driving thing like with his board. He's like, what's going on here? And sees this surf movie on the screen, and then just ends up staying for the whole of the event, and has since messaged the church and wants to come and volunteer in one of our food kitchen programs, which is just great. And we're hearing stories of people tuning in on the online as we were praying for people with with blood cancer, and that really spoke to them. And some people were struggling with headaches, and we gave people the opportunity to hear the word of God, but then also to experience God, because it was Paul says, I didn't just come with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power. And let me tell you, more so than ever in these days that we're living in, do we need the church to rise up and to preach the gospel out there in the highways and the byways, but also with that, not just with wise and persuasive words, but let's give people an opportunity to experience God. And so we wanted to do that as well. We've got some great stories coming in of people that have been really touched by God through that.
Yeah.
But you weren't encouraging pedestrians or anything like that. You were asking people to stay within the confines of their cars, etc. So you were sticking to all of the social distancing to the best of your abilities.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that the Cornwall Council asked us to do, was to encourage everybody to remain in their cars. And so we wanted to honour them. We didn't want to be seen to be so we encouraged everyone to remain in their cars, but we did have this space, an allocated space, just for those that would wander by. And then we had people that were actually stewarding and marshalling that. Like Sally said, these Perrin's Angels were brilliant, just making sure that everyone was being compliant with the regulations.
Brilliant. So this was in a public car park, correct?
Yeah, council run car park.
So the big question, who paid for the parking?
Jesus did.
Yeah, that's the Sunday school answer. I want the grown-up answer now. Come on.
Yeah.
No.
They had asked us on the application, are we willing to pay for the car park spaces? Which at that time we were thinking, okay, there's 40 car park spaces. And we said yes. And on the last information that came back, the councillor said, and we've decided to waiver the car parking fee because we've heard that you've been feeding the 5,000 during the COVID lockdown. So God went before us then. We did have a couple of people coming in their cars saying, oh, where do we pay? How do we pay? And they kindly put that into an offering bucket at the end. So, yeah.
But we really felt it was important, and under your advice, actually, not to give the council any reason to say no. So if they're asking, are you prepared to pay for your car park? Well, yeah, we'll pay it. Do you know what I mean? And I'm a firm believer that if God gives you a vision, then he will give you the provision. So, all he looks for us to do is to step out in obedience to what he's telling us to do. And when we locate his heart through prayer and intercession, and we step out in obedience, the provision will be there for that. And sometimes the provision isn't always there straight away. It's that little moment where we've got to step out the boat, first, and we don't know if we're going to sink or swim, but we just need to trust that when Jesus calls us to get out, that we will be okay, as long as we keep our eyes locked onto him. It would be sweet.
So one of the questions which is just popping through on the live stream in front of me, the purpose of the event. So was it primarily to be a witness in Newquay, or was it to be just getting church back together again? What was the prime driver?
I think it was both. I think this is an opportunity. I think Sally just talked about, Acts 20 verse 20, where Paul says, I didn't withheld from you teaching both publicly and from house to house. And throughout this season, what we've seen is a real fresh vision and passion to see oikos, that households coming together. But then also there's something very public about the ministry of Jesus. And this is a great opportunity for churches then to re-establish public forms of worship and the preaching of the gospel. So there is that sense of, this is a moment for the church to come back together, but it's also a moment to actually tell of the good and the message of hope that we profess in Jesus. So it's all of that, I would say.
So I'm guessing the dust has settled now, just about. Have you calculated what this little shindig cost you?
Yeah, we're looking in the region of probably £1,800 to £2,000.
Yeah, and that's for all your publicity. That would include the stage, and the audio, and the big screen that we brought in for the event. Yeah.
And a really, really big question: are you going to do any more?
Do you know, I would love to do some more. We've had a number of churches in Cornwall saying that this that they had already begun to start thinking about this and what they were going to do. And so our hope really is that although we might do, we had a couple more in our hearts that we were thinking, but more importantly, we just really were hoping that this would inspire others, other churches, other ministry leaders to think creatively about how they can worship Jesus publicly, meet together publicly. And if this would help in some way to do that, then that would be our biggest hope. So it's not saying that we've got to run them all, but we're happy to share resources, happy to share ideas.
It was very encouraging. One of the local councillors actually came up right at the end and actually did say about another car park, which is just on the outskirts of Newquay, which they would be very happy for us to use, because the car park, I think, will start getting busy in the centre of town, obviously, as now the restrictions are being lifted and hopefully tourism is coming back into Newquay. So yeah, we're excited to do another one.
Oh yeah, we would. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a defining moment for the church in the United Kingdom. I think this is our moment where we've got such a message of hope, and it cannot be contained within our buildings. And I'm a firm believer. Let's not go back to business as usual as it was, and let's just try and get things back. Let's actually say, God, what are you requiring of us in this moment? How can we join in with you in your mission? Don't forget, Jesus says, I came to seek and save that which was lost. That's the mission, and that's the mission of God. And I think this is a moment where we've got to allow that entrepreneurial gifting within the church to rise up in this hour.
Well, I think you're an absolute inspiration to all of us. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a few questions that have been coming in while we've been going along, and I hope you won't mind fielding a few from them. But there's also another observation. Somebody else actually got there at the same time as you. Somebody else had a COVID compliant drive-in service, but they didn't notify the council because they did it in the church car park. So managed to keep it all within their own confines. So well done, you guys. I'm just going to look through to see if I can find another couple of questions which may be of general interest. Actually, some of these are slightly more from a legal point of view, but if you'd be kind enough to stick around for a while, because I'm sure there's going to be a few questions coming in as we go along. I'm going to ask Navaid to rejoin us now, if he can.
Thank you very much, Rob. Matt, a real privilege to be part of the team that was able to help you. You're a huge inspiration. I just really wanted to sort of try and summarize some things for people. Now, we were discussing before that the law is actually unclear. Now, the regulations are changing all the time. Obviously, the COVID regulations were passed in a hurry. Then there were statutory instruments which enable those. And then the guidance that was particularly, if you like, relevant as far as the councils are concerned, the councils that we're dealing with at the moment, that's the COVID-19 guidance for the safe use of places of worship during the pandemic. That was published on the 12th of June this year. And obviously, the reason we say it's unclear is because drive-in services are not actually specifically highlighted there. The point about the law being unclear is that the law can be contested. And so for other people who are considering doing this, just because you get a no, that's not the final answer. Push back and expect to see that victory, and ask us to help at the Christian Legal Centre and Christian Concern if you need to. We'd be happy to give you advice. But what you were saying, Matt, was in effect, in terms of council owned land, it would be highly advisable, if not mandatory. You said about the health and safety risk assessment, focusing on how the drive-in was going to be COVID-19 compliant. And you also talked about compliance in terms of how to deter people from turning up on foot. But of course, you weren't able to do that completely. And a very good point about the risk assessment should preferably be validated and checked by an independent health and safety consultant. That just adds weight to that document. You talked about the certificate of public liability insurance. In our previous conversations, we were talking about sort of training plans for stewards, to control traffic. You obviously talked about Pyrian's Angels as well, and that would obviously ensure that the whole event was COVID-19 compliant, and stewards of course would be wearing gloves, perhaps masks with hand sanitizers, and encouraging people not to leave their cars of course parked 2 meters apart. Local police, you talked about that, being informed well in advance, and of course that whole issue about offering to pay for car parking. So that would be, I mean, we talked a lot about council land, but if you are doing an event on private land that's not owned by the organizer of the event, so you're hiring the land, obviously there's an agreement between yourself, that it would be the church and the landowner, and that of course would include permission to use the land. It would be advisable to have all those things in place, although it may not be absolutely necessary as far as that's concerned. But obviously informing the police if you are going to use private land in advance is very useful. What you don't want, of course, is the police turning up because somebody has actually said, oh, I think there's something going on here, you might as well check it. And then of course, if you are holding, as one church did, they holding it on their own land in church car parks, of course it's useful to have all the documents that you've said, but obviously, you know, they're just to hand, as it were. So that's really, you know, where the analysis would get to as far as our conversations were concerned.
Just picking up on that, I think it's necessary to be able to demonstrate as best you can that you are paying full attention to the regulations and doing your best to ensure that all of the social distancing is being adhered to. And providing you do that, it's going to be quite difficult really to mount a proper challenge, particularly if the event is being held on private land as opposed to public land. We've got one question coming from Ian Taylor saying that they've been working with a Sainsbury's supermarket and they've got permission from Sainsbury's to use their car park. Do they need to talk to the council? Is the question which has arisen. Navaid, what would be your take on that?
I think it would always be useful to talk to the council for several reasons. One, obviously, you're being a good citizen and you're involving them. The second is that if there is an objection, you want the objection to be fronted up, as it were. To a certain extent, it is a bit like the canary in the mine. You know, there may be people who are objecting out there. You need to be able to flesh that out. If you do get objections, please come straight to us. In our as I said, the law is unclear, but the councils may have a difficult time, depending on what the reasons are, in justifying, because there's already been one, and as I said, the laws aren't clear. So contact the council and see what they say and get back to us.
We've also got a question coming from David Oliver, which says that the new rules in England say gatherings of over 30 are not permitted. How does this meet that rule? Well, there's a danger there of conflating a couple of things. They have indeed relaxed the rules somewhat on meetings in church and outside. It was until recently that you could have a maximum of 6 people meeting outside, and the churches were only open for individual prayer. But from the 4th of July, that regulation has been amended, and you can now meet in up to 30 people. But of course, the difference with the drive-in is the people are staying within the confines of their own car. So technically speaking, the gathering isn't more than 30. It's a gathering of 4 or 5 or 2 or however many people are in the car. So it falls slightly outside the public gatherings limit. And also bear in mind, drive-in cinema has been going on now since the middle of June and has been perfectly acceptable. So to ban these on that basis would be quite difficult, purely and simply under equality law.
Yes.
Question from Wendy Palsy. She said, what type of stuff needs to go on the risk assessment, and how long did it take you to get it to a point where it was up and running?
Do you know what? I think the best thing to do, I would be more than happy to make our risk assessment available. I'm happy to share it with whoever. I just want to put that out there. Why reinvent the wheel? You're more than welcome to look at our risk assessment. There was a number of questions that the Cornwall Council came to us and says, have you done this? Have you done? We'd already submitted them on our risk assessment. So it was just ensuring that how are we going to ensure that people are going to stay in their cars. How are we going to ensure that social distancing was going to take place? There was all sorts of stuff. I mean, to be fair,
it depends, I think, on the location.
Yeah.
With a risk assessment as well, isn't it? Because that may vary. We can obviously share ours, and I would just like to say that we have an administrator within Wave House as well, and she worked very hard as well to support Matt doing that. So things like, because it was on a main road, so the whole traffic, making sure that we weren't blocking the main road and getting people in, having that waiting area. So the risk assessments may change and vary. It depends on the location that you're using.
Yeah.
But thanks for the offer, Matt. If you're happy to share that with us, we can get that put up on our website and people can at least access it as the basis of a template for.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
In fact, on that same theme, there's a question from Holy Trinity Western, which says, is there a set of documents that you'll be able to make available as a groundwork for others to work from? Are you happy to make the rest of the documents that you put together in that package more widely available so that people can share your resource?
Absolutely, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. So the other sort of documents, obviously, we had our public liability, which, if you're going to be running these kind of events on any public land, you're going to have them. And then we did things like site plans. Do you know what I mean? So we kind of marked out where people were going to go, and that was quite an important thing. We literally went onto Google Maps and just printed off a map of the whole area, highlighted where it was, so that when they're looking at it and making decisions, they can see what you're actually going to be doing on that physical space, on that land. So that was an important thing. We can happy to share that, but yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I've got another question from David Oliver. He says, did you feel at any point that the public may look at this and think it's just church wanting to get its holy huddle and bend the rules for them? How did you overcome that?
I'm done with holy huddles, I have to say. I am done with navel gazing. I just want to get out there and tell some people about Jesus. And I think the church has been silenced for too long. I think it's time now that we stood up and we preach this gospel. And I feel like it needs to be house to house, oikos. And we need to see a resurgence again of that, of homes coming alive to the plans and purposes of God, becoming houses of prayer. But then also this public preaching of the gospel, like just John Wesley, man, he was just out there. He wasn't confined by a building. He got on his horse. So I could really get quite passionate about that. But the last thing that this thing was not was a holy huddle.
Of that I'm confident. We've got a comment coming from Barry Thompson.
I spend my time trying to dismantle them.
We've got a comment coming from Barry Thompson. He said up in the northeast of England, they've got a car park with 1,200 spaces, and they've so far got 6 churches on board. So I think that's something we can pray into, that event would get the go ahead. But Barry, please be assured that if you have any difficulty getting that event off the ground and we can be of any assistance to you, please call us and we'll do all that we can to make sure that becomes not just a concept but a reality. So thanks for doing that, and it's brilliant, and so it's so encouraging to hear these things going on up and down the country.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. Come on.
I think we've covered most of the questions, and we've touched on the law so far. I think it is absolutely, as Navaid was saying earlier, I think the one thing which is clear about these regulations is that the regulations are unclear, and they're going to be subject to change further and further as they go along. At the moment, so much of what is in the regulations is just not congruent with the rest of it. It's contradictory, and you've got just one thing's okay, but something else which is entirely analogous isn't okay. So they just don't make sense. So we're going to be continuing to push. At the moment, we're pushing the government on. We're judicially reviewing the government's decision to close places of worship, and we're trying to push back on that and saying, look, you shouldn't be regulating the church. We can do that ourselves. We can open. We're responsible. We can do it in a socially distanced way, in exactly the same way that Matt and Sally have done their event. So we are pushing back against this as much as we can, but are obviously respectful of the law and want these events to go through in a lawful and orderly fashion. We're not unruly people, and we wouldn't be encouraging people to do things that are not in accord with the law. Now, I know that our Chief Executive, Andrea Williams, is lurking in the background, and she's going to want to say something before we close this this live stream. So I'm going to invite Andrea in. Here she is. Look at that. And this is the point, folks, where I have to shut up and listen as I hand over to Andrea.
You know, it's been absolutely brilliant to be a part of this. Just watching you today, Matt and Sally, thank you for your courage. Thank you for your faith. This was Church Without Walls, but it was also built off the back of amazing relationship and amazing work. I mean, this idea that you have been feeding 5,000 people during this period, that is church alive and in the community. And the thing about it all is this: we have historically in this nation been the healing houses and the hope houses, alive and open with the hope of Jesus Christ 24/7. Yeah. And I think that one of the very concerning things about this whole period is that we have begun to allow the government to tell us how we worship, how to open, and what we might do. There is a fundamental principle of freedom which can be argued throughout all the courts of this land and way beyond this land, in fact, that says that our freedom to worship God is something that is not given to us by the government. Now, I am all about being a respecter of rules, about being respectful of health conditions, about complying where we can. But when the government begins to say you can or cannot sing, when the government begins to say, as it has done during this period, that we will introduce measures to ban conversion therapy, when the government says you cannot wear a cross at work because of health and safety reasons, which we can prove they are not damaging, then we have a situation where the government begins to say how you worship, when you can worship, what you do. And it's not the job of the church at that point to keel over and say, okay then, but rather to say to the government, here is the Lord God. When we obey him, so a nation flourishes. Here is the hope. We are essential because we can provide hope and healing to our communities. Trust us like you trust Sainsbury's. Yeah. Trust us even like you trust the pubs. Trust us like you trust drive-in cinemas. Because beyond all of this, what we have is the message of good news that actually brings people from despair, from sickness, to health and vibrancy and hope and beauty and community. And this community is not confined to online, although that's great, and I love all those initiatives. It's not. There is something about the physical community. There is something about even seeing one another across a car park. There is something really important about that is fundamental. And we cannot, as a church in this nation, permit for that fundamental principle to be lost. Because when we do, they will be saying to you, there will be some parts of the Bible, maybe they're tricky for people. Maybe they shouldn't be in the public domain. That's not stuff that should be preached on a Sunday because it may damage people. It may not be good for their health. People can't change certain behaviors. So I'm saying, well done, Matt and Sally. I hope and pray that all those that are watching right now are encouraged and emboldened. Always be wise. Don't unnecessarily antagonize, but just as they did in Acts, let's go out wherever we're given opportunity, through the screens, through the car parks, through safe places. Let's go and redeem our communities for the Lord Jesus Christ. Let's serve those meals. Let's provide the healing houses and the hope houses, the education houses. Let's go and do it. We're seeing it happen in Newquay. Was it Newcastle? 1,200 people? Yeah, come on. Let's see these things. Let's see these things occur, for the kingdom of God is near. And let's really and let's serve the nation. Let's serve the government. Yeah. Anyway, thanks to the legal team and to everyone out there. We are always here. Day and night, pretty much. We are here. Isn't that right, Navaid and Rob?
Absolutely. Day and night, yeah. and holidays and weekends. We've got one comment which I think is a good one to finish. It's coming from Natalie Grove Stevenson, and it says the Antichrist is really out there, but we are unstoppable.
Amen.
We are.
And
Amen.
I think we are unstoppable. So with that thought, we will close. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to serve you today.
God bless
Bye-bye.
you.
God bless. Bye-bye.